Hello everyone and welcome to Brewed in Barnsley with your host me, Matt McMillan. Each episode I'll be joined by a well-known Barnsley personality to discuss how living here has shaped their lives. On this month's episode, I'm joined by poet Ian McMillan. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. It's called Brewed in Barnsley. So you're not here to drink beer or even tea, unfortunately. We do have water on the table rather than tea. But the idea is that you, yourself, have been brewed in Barnsley.
Yes, I have.
And my first question because of that is always, do you like a cup of tea?
I love a cup of tea. I always start the morning off with my early morning stroll when I wander around the village that I live in, Darfield, about 5:20 till about 6:10.
That's nice and early, that is.
My time of day, I love it. After that, I start to go downhill. But it's just a wonderful time of day to wander around the same route every day and see maybe how it's changed and how some of it's the same, because I've always lived in Darfield. And all the way around, I'm dreaming of my first cup of tea, which I'm going to have when I get back. And the thing about me and tea is I don't have milk. And people have said to me, call yourself a Yorkshireman and you don't have milk. And I always say, well, if I want a cup of milk, I'll have a cup of milk. But to me, milk destroys the taste of the tea. I love a nice black tea. I think it's a nice... But you still get people...
So it's not that you don't like milk?
I like milk. I'll have a cup of milk. But just the idea of milk in tea, it's like, I don't know, it's like custard on chips. You know, it's just a weird thing to me. So black tea. And, interestingly, me and my wife have been married for 45 years. And very occasionally, when she's making a cup of tea, I'll make her a cup of tea and she sometimes makes me a cup of tea and she puts milk in it. And I go, hang on, we've been married since 1979. She goes, oh yeah, I forgot. So it's like always, even with people who've known each other a long time, tea without milk is a bit of an aberration. But I like it because it kind of sparks me off.
See, I can't do that. I can have coffee without milk, but I don't go for tea without milk. It's too strong a flavour to me if I have tea without milk.
I like tea without milk, but I like espresso. I allow myself one espresso a day. And for years, Barnsley was an espresso desert. And now you can buy espressos in lots of places. First place that did it was the Aroma on the arcade. And you go in and you go, espresso, please. And they go, you do know that's a small black coffee. And you go, yes, I'm a man of the world. I've been around. And then they'd make it and they'd go, is that all you get? You go, yes, that's all you get. So I've always tried to be, sophisticated in my taste. And finally, Barnsley's catching up with me.
We were having a bit of a chat about this before we started recording, and there are there's so many coffee places in Barnsley now. One you mentioned as well, Gallagher's down the arcade.
Gallagher's is really nice. I like Gallagher's. That's in the site of the old Aroma. Gallagher's is nice. I like the one in the town hall. I like the old George Yard. I like the one here at the Digital Media Centre. And it was always seen as, you get a cup of tea. And I like tea. But now the fact that you can get all these different espressos, lattes, and it sounds silly that we are kind of celebrating that. But then we remember when it was a bit of a coffee desert. And now it's great that people can do that. I did go in a coffee shop in Barnsley and somebody bought a latte and the person behind the counter said, do you want your receipt? And she went, I'm not starting that game. So some things don't change.
Oh dear. Well, we could talk all day about tea and coffee, I'm sure. But one thing we want to chat to you about, Ian, is you and your career. And you're a man of many talents. I introduced you as a poet at the start. And I said, is that all right? Because obviously that is your main profession, but you do all sorts, journalist, playwright, radio host, all sorts of things. And it's all kind of come off the back of that poetry, I suppose. So where did this all begin? Where did the love of the English language start? Where did your poetry begin?
I always think it started in three ways. The first thing is that my dad, who was a Scotsman, his auntie was a poet. His auntie was a Victorian rhyming poet called Bella Howardson. We used to write me dad rhyming letters. So somehow poetry and rhyme come through your DNA. I never met Bella Howardson, obviously, but my dad kept the letters. And they appeared like in my DNA, in my blood. And then my dad and my mum met as pen pals. My dad was from Scotland, my mum was from Great Oulton, and they were both in the services in the war. My dad was in the Navy, my mum was in the WAFs. And they had this thing where single service people could write to each other. And so they had this kind of letter-born romance. And I think that's the other reason I'm a writer, that writing was the thing that brought them together. And writing was so important for them. And they eventually got married and, my mum moved from Great Oaken to Darfield. They lived in Darfield. But writing was always their thing, and they kept the letters and they keep referring to them. Then the third reason is just the place, Darfield, was part of the West Riding of Yorkshire when I was a kid. And the West Riding of Yorkshire was a wonderful education authority run by this genius called Sir Alec Clegg, who just said all children are creative. So in Low Valley County Primary School, we sang, we danced, we wrote poetry, we made plays, we did art, we made sculpture. In every lesson. Wow. We do a bit of maths, then they say, right, write a poem about that. We do the Tudors and Stuarts, let's make a play up about that.
That sounds fun.
It was, and to be honest, it's better than a lot of schooling these days because inevitably they have to pass tests, they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to do what they call them, frontal adverbials, front-loaded adverbials. I couldn't have done them, but I was just inspired. There was a teacher called Mr. Meakin who died fairly recently, who was in adult education in Barnsley eventually. And I remember him, we went in the yard, and he said, right, we're going to write a poem about this yard. We don't know much in yard. But he said, a leaf, God, I remember this so vividly, and it's 60-odd years ago. This leaf blew past, and he went, look, a leaf blowing by, and he kind of pointed, and he put, write that down, the leaf blew by. And it weren't said in so many words, but as we were writing this poem about the leaf blowing by, he said, not in so many words, what you're writing is important. What you're writing is really important. And it's as important as these writers on the shelves. And that's what I believe about Barnsley, the people that we, as writers, as creative people, we're as important as anywhere else. At secondary school, this teacher said to me, you ought to move to London, as though somehow it was expected that you move to London. But I think, I've always lived here. You can make a living here.
We've spoken to a lot of people on the podcast who, Sam Nixon came on and he was talking about the same thing because he did obviously move to London to do the TV presenting, but then he said he's moved back now. He said, there's no reason to. You don't have to move away.
No, perhaps in the old days you did. I know Barry Hines of Kes, he moved to London because that was seen as the thing, get to London and make your living. Somebody said to me, do you maintain a base in Barnsley? I said, I call it my house. They assume that you don't live here. It's strange, very strange.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, why have you stayed? What has kept you in Barnsley? What do you love so much about it?
I think what I like about it is its kind of disparate nature. So, to be honest with you, because I'm in Darfield, and I've always lived in Darfield, Barnsley was like an exotic place.
Right, yeah.
On the 213 or the 13 or the 37. Wombwell was our shopping place.
Right.
Wombwell, they had this fantastic department store called Diggles's department store. That's hard to believe now. There was a sign outside it that said, Diggles checks are as good as gold. And there was Burton's, there was Woolworths, there was all these shops, and so it felt you went to Wombwell, a shop called Turvey's where I bought stamps from my stamp collection. And Barnsley was seen as this exotic place on the hill that you go to every so often. When me and my wife first started going out, we'd go out to Barnsley because that was seen as the place. It was like you're going out to the big city. And it always felt welcoming. It felt there were things happening. We used to go to a lot of folk clubs around Barnsley when we were first going out, going to the cinema in Barnsley, because by then the one in Darfield had shut, but the ones in Wombwell were still there. And what I like about it is, the main thing I like about Barnsley is that people aren't impressed by what I do. That is a fact.
Right.
So, I'll be in the shop and they'll go, we heard they on radio, yapping, or, just stuff like that. And, you go into the shop and you go, bag of plain crisps, please. And they'll go, help, don't say out, he'll put it in a poem. Write a poem about them crisps. And I like that. You don't want to go anywhere where people are impressed by it. And also, if I lived anywhere else, you could be tempted to do that because you could do my job from anywhere. That's a fact. I don't drive, so it's lucky that I'm on various bus and train routes, but you could do this job from anywhere. But then if I moved away from Barnsley, you'd feel that something was being cut off, that, you'd lose a limb somehow. Because I always quote this fantastic poet from Birmingham called Roy Fisher, who said, Birmingham's what I think with. And Barnsley is what I think with. I think in its language, in its thinking, in its brussenness. The way that we're so brussend and kind of oppositional, that's what I like about it. I couldn't live anywhere else.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's sort of an inspiration for you.
It is.
Inspiration for your work.
The people and the place,
So is that then, you said you were inspired at school.
Yeah.
After school then, so is that when you carried on your poetry? And when did you think, do you know what, I can turn this into a career?
Well, I always wanted to, the two things have gone side by side. I like writing and I like showing off. I like standing up in public and showing off. And I've always liked that. So me and my mates formed a band in Barnsley when I was about 15 called Oscar the Frog. I was like the worst drummer ever. I had no drums. Oh, this is a fact.
You are quite bad if you got no drums and you're a drummer.
I had Tupperware. I had big Tupperware pots, salad pots, and then I was drumming. But I liked it. I liked being on stage, folks looking at me. I enjoyed that. So I've always tried to kind of meld the two. So going into folk clubs, standing up and reading poems was the thing, and being in a band, and me and my mate formed a bit of a comedy duo going around folk clubs. And that was great, but you never thought you could make a living at it. You never thought that, because you go to the library and you get the books out and it go, so-and-so spends all year in Surrey apart from 2 weeks on the Algarve. I think, well, I spend all year in Darfield apart from 2 weeks at Flamborough. And so you think, how can I do this? And eventually I went to college. I went to North Staffordshire Polytechnic, did a degree called Modern Studies, which I did enjoy. And then I left there and I thought, right, if I get a career, my wife was a teacher. If I get a career, I'm stuck because you're on that career. So I thought I'll get a job. So I went to work on a building site in Sheffield.
Right.
And then I got the sack from there. And then in 1978, I went to work in the tennis ball factory in Barnsley, Slazenger's.
Were you writing too much poetry?
I was writing too much poetry. The building site, they were all Didas, obviously, because they were from Sheffield. And I've always had the Guardian newspaper. And I used to get there, and I used to sit there, and they used to set fire to it. He was going, Aaron, Darry, Zevy, Darry. It's funny for about the first 6 months. But no.
Not whilst you're holding it. No.
Exactly. So I got the sack from there. Then I went to work at Tennis Ball Factory, and I was writing poems. I was getting the odd poem published here and there, and getting to do the odd reading. And actually it was okay at the Tennis Ball Factory because it was 3 shifts. So if you wanted to go and do a gig somewhere, you got back late, that didn't matter.
Right.
But then this Yorkshire Arts Association, who were a branch of the Arts Council, were giving out these grants. This is 1983. And they give you up to £1,000 if you gave your job up and went freelance, which is a lot of money
at
now.
the time.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. So my wife said, go and apply. My parents, apply. So I did. I applied for this £1,000. I said, look, if I give my job up, I can be a full-time writer. And they gave me £800, not £1,000. And that was so interesting because it's not that much less, but it feels less. Yeah. You're kind of going, £1,000, £800. It's not the same. But luckily, my wife and everybody around me has always been supportive. That's why I always support people. She went, go on then, give your job up. If you want, give it up. And my parents went, give your job up. So I gave my job up. And then this funny thing happens. When you go, right, give me a job up. I'm here. Go on then. And no, it happens. Nothing happens at all. So then I started doing creative writing workshops all over South Yorkshire and writing odd bits for the NME and writing poems and doing odd bits here and there and always saying yes. And that's always my advice to people who want to be freelance. If somebody rings you up and says, do you want to do this? Say yes. If it don't work out, they won't ask you again. Just say yes. And eventually, things started to build up. You know, I started to get on the radio, on Radio Sheffield, then Radio 4, then Radio 3, and just publishing books. But it just started with that grant, which really helped me. And it always helps people. If you just give somebody a little bit of money and a little bit of encouragement, and then they can set off and start doing it.
Yeah. Well, are there still those opportunities available, do you feel, nowadays for people, particularly here in Barnsley and South Yorkshire, to say, you know, I want to become a creative, not necessarily a poet, but of any type, and go, I'll give up my job because there's a grant out there. Do you think there still are those opportunities?
There are. I mean, since austerity, there are fewer, but I think they're still there. I think, you know, the Arts Council likes Barnsley. It's giving a lot of money to Barnsley, which is great. That's good. We're one of their priority areas. There are always funds to be found where you can do something. And maybe, you know, do the thing that I did, which was work in Tennis Ball Factory, which wasn't great. And I thought, actually, I'd be able to make the tennis balls and at the same time think about poetry. But because it was a kind of mechanical thing, it nearly knocked all the poetry out of me.
Right.
But I think there are still these opportunities. And what there wasn't when I was a young man was the internet. And, of course, the internet helps. You know, the internet, you can make more contacts, you can do more things, you can publish yourself, you can set up your own gig, you can set up your own DIY night. There's a lot more of that kind of thing. The trouble is, as you know, there's that thing where you're trying to get paid for it. And that is always the hard thing. I would recommend that people did a few things for nothing, but always try and get them to pay you. I still get people ringing me up going, we can't afford to pay you, but it'd be good for your profile. I said, no.
My profile's all right.
So, there's one particular book festival, I won't name it, down south, where they rang up, I have an organiser, my agent who organises me, and they rang up and said, look, before we talk about Ian, on a point of principle, we never pay the writers, if that's all right with you. And he went, well, all right. What sort of place is he going to do if he came? They said, well, it's a room. We sell about 200 tickets at a tenner each. And he went, so that's 2,000 quid. Can he have just a little bit of that? They go, no, on a point of principle, we don't pay the writers. Just thought we'd check. I said, no, that's fine. We'll not come. He said, well, that's fine. Just thought we'd tell you. Yeah. So there are still the opportunities, and perhaps more so than there were, actually, because, we've got 5 award-winning museums in Barnsley. We've got the Civic. We've got all these other things that are happening. I think Barnsley, the other reason I've stayed is that we seem, for the last 20 years, and it's happening, to be on the cusp of change. Things are happening. You can stay here and make a living. I always want the clever ones to stay. I don't want them to go. I want them to get their degrees and come back. And they are doing, they're coming back. We know that how well the middle of Barnsley are doing, how well some of the villages are doing. The more of that, the better, definitely.
And I think that's it. It's that realising that there are opportunities here. And there's a thing called that Barnsley Civic put on every month called the Creative Socials.
And they get loads of people.
And I went along thinking, okay, it's going to be a room of, I don't know, maybe 10 creative. Yeah. About 50 people. It was incredible. And there's still people that come every month that are brand new. Yeah. This town really is very creative.
It is, and it's partly because, as you know, the town's invested in creativity over the years. Some places haven't. We can name towns. Some places haven't invested in it, but Barnsley has. And, I can remember when the Cooper Gallery wasn't as vibrant as it is now, when Worsborough Mill wasn't as vibrant as it is now, when the Civic wasn't doing a great deal years and years ago. And now it is, we're so lucky. And it feels that a young person in my position wouldn't even have to think about moving out of Barnsley, which is great.
Yeah, and I think it's quite visible now, this art as well. And one thing, particularly your piece of artwork is visible. Bright Nights is coming up soon. And your famous quote about fierce love.
Fierce Barnsley.
Barnsley's fierce love holds you forever in its heart.
That took some... We wrote that. I wrote that. And they said, write as a poem, originally a poem for this thing. So I wrote far too many words. And that's always good, because you write far too many words. And we had these endless committee meetings where they're going, I don't think that works. That bit don't work. That bit don't work. And it gradually got whittled down to Barnsley's fierce love holds you forever in its heart. Yeah. And to me, the crux of that line is the word fierce. Fierce is such a great word. My mate Ray used to use it fierce, meaning a good thing. So I thought, I was playing the great Darfield artist, Patrick Murphy, put it on neon. And so, there it was. And we got that wonderful sculpture of Graham Ibbison's in the town square, which people, they love it, don't they?
Yeah, the COVID memorial. Yeah. And the words are on there as well, aren't they? So how proud does it make you feel to see something like that in your hometown? That'll be there, hopefully, forever, really.
Well, hopefully, yes. I mean, it does make you proud. It makes you think that it's a piece of you, a piece of me, that's there, that reflects that terrible time that we all went through when we thought things are going to end. We thought, didn't we, that bands are never going to tour, choirs never going to sing, performances never going to happen, and we kind of hung on, and Barnsley did a great deal. Then we did this. What I want to do, I've tried it a few times, is you sit by it like that, you kind of sit by it like that, like, and hopefully somebody will read it out and go, that were me. But they won't believe it. They won't believe it.
If you ever see Ian sitting next to the COVID memorial, he's waiting to...
I am.
Please talk to him.
Please talk to me. I've always wanted to be on a bus and somebody be reading one of my books. That's never happened yet either.
Again, anyone reading one of Ian's books?
Yeah, please. If I'm on the bus, just even if it's rubbish, if you don't like it, I'll sign it for you.
Oh dear. Well, that'll be yes. Well, hopefully that does happen to you at some point.
I think it will one day.
I'm fascinated to know what a typical sort of week, if there is such a thing, what is a typical week for a poet? What do you do? I mean, people probably think you sit at home.
You do all day, yes.
Yeah, do you sit at home in your yard waiting for a leaf to blow by and then you're inspired? Or do you have projects in mind? How does it work?
Well, I would think there are typical weeks, actually. So I always get up early, as I say. I'm always up early because that's my best time. I feel fantastic. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I feel great. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like some kind of waxwork. I've gone. You know, and in the
you get
evening,
an espresso from Gallagher's, I think.
I do. Because then at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I said to my wife, I'm just going to listen to a nice classical concert on Radio 3. And she goes, I'll give you 3 minutes. And I've gone. So in the morning, I do my writing. So my typical days, I'll get up, I'll do my stroll, I'll come back, I'll do my writing. So I have certain regular things. I have my fortnightly column for the Barnsley Chronicle, 750 words of pure gold. I have my weekly column for the Yorkshire Post, 600 words of pure gold. I have my monthly column for the Dalesman, 750 words of pure gold. So they are my regular things that I have to write. About 20 weeks of the year, I present my show on Radio 4, The Verb. For 20-odd years, it was on Radio 3, which was good, and now it's moved to Radio 4. So I have to write the script for that. I have to then tackle the enormous Manhattan skyline of books that I've got to read for The Verb, because there's nothing worse, it's happened to me, where it's obvious the presenter hasn't read the book.
Yeah.
You always have to read the book. I like writing in books. People tell me off for that, but I love buying a book. I think that shows you love the book.
Yeah.
I read the book, I underline it. So my week is, I have to get my writing done, I have to write these things, I have to read my books for The Verb and underline them. I then have bigger projects. So I've just finished writing a piece about 20 Yorkshire people, past and present, 20 quite short pieces for the Skipton Camerata, which is a professional orchestra based in Skipton. So I've been writing them. I've been writing a series of 15 sonnets for a thing called the Academy of Urbanism, which is a group of architects. And every year they have 15 awards. And they have town, neighbourhood, city, international city, and street. And I write a sonnet for each one, 15. And then the prizes, they don't win a cash prize, they win a framed copy of my sonnet. But that's and if I don't do that, if I'm not doing that, I feel kind of dull. Then in the middle of the week, Wednesdays, we have my little grandson Louis, who's only 2, and he's into tractors and diggers. Right. So that's the day when I can't do any writing. He arrives, come on, Grandad, let's start playing at tractors and diggers. So we take him to Elsica, where he watches them driving up and down the tractors, cutting the grass. He loves that. So that's the kind of fulcrum of my week. And then Thursday's The Verb, if it's on, and I go across to Media City, get the train from Barnsley to Huddersfield, that wonderful train. And then, so that's my week. And then the week flies by. But when my kids were little, and they told, their mates knew that I was a poet, they said, what? They imagined we had no telly, that we sat around in front room in a circle and read poems, but didn't clap at the end of the poems, we snapped our fingers. We thought we were kind of Barnsley beatniks. Right. Yeah, but that's what a typical week is. And then you think, where's the week gone? Yeah. Where has it gone?
Oh, it's fascinating. I suppose because you're so varied with what you do as well, it keeps you quite.
Well, that's the freelance thing. That's the always saying yes. You know, if people ring you up, do something, always say yes. And it does keep you on your toes and just trying new things out. I keep telling myself I'm semi-retired. Although my wife says, retire from what? Exactly. Because this never feels like a job.
Well, it sounds like you get one day off a week with your grandson, which is probably more tiresome than some of your work anyway.
Oh, gosh, it is. But a lot of fun.
Well, something else that kept you very busy in 2024 was the Barnsley Book Festival. We referred to some book festivals earlier in this podcast, and that was in February in 2024. Yeah. That's coming back again in 2025.
Very exciting.
How big, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a month of celebrating poets, authors, books. There's workshops and all sorts of things, isn't there? How important is that to have in Barnsley?
I think it's great. The Barnsley Library Service is wonderful. In a time when, as we know, terribly, some libraries are closing down. Barnsley is expanding. Darfield, where I live, we're just having the library done up. They've had a few libraries done up, Oiland, Wunwell. And then Barnsley Book Festival. And we got a lot of that publicity at the start. You'll know this, where they're going, Barnsley's having a book festival. And you think, all right, we are. And it was such an ambitious festival. We had some fantastic sessions. I did a few workshops. I introduced people. It was very, very exciting. And it showed people that we can have a book festival that was spread out all across the borough in all the different libraries and make it work. And what I worried about was, because I've seen this in other festivals, you might get a bit of festival fatigue, where people go, I can't be bothered to go and watch that Tibetan novelist because I've just been to that talk about knitting. But in the end, you didn't get that because that glorious thing happened where there was a kind of core audience, but But there were people coming from all over for that particular thing. There were fans of the Tibetan novelist. I'm making that up about the Tibetan novelist, you know what I mean? Fans of the knitting. And they'd turn up and you thought, oh, there's an audience. There's an audience there. You know, our 2 bookshops in Barnsley, Foster's down the arcade and the Book Vault, they're doing great work. It shows that there's an audience for reading in Barnsley, and it shows that people see their libraries in Barnsley as a kind of cultural hub, that I can go there and these things will happen. And that's so exciting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. That'll be great. I'm doing a couple of things there, and I'm on the steering committee. And there's such an exciting steering committee because they've got that thing, that giant snail shell.
Yes,
God,
I was going to mention.
That's a thing. Because we started talking about it. They go, look, we've got a great idea for a giant snail shell. And you go, you nod. It's like in any other business in your meeting, giant snail shell. To be honest, I never thought it would happen because you go, just one of them great ideas. Then suddenly, here it is.
Well, I didn't think it'd happen because I didn't think it'd fit anywhere I've seen. It's absolutely gigantic.
Massive. And what a great idea. Another example of Barnsley thinking big. So you get the kids in the giant snail shell, they hear the stories in the giant snail shell, and it's going to be back, of course, next year for the book festival. And what we want is Barnsley Book Festival to be on the map, on the circuit. You know, as people talk about Hay, they go to the book festival at Hay, they go to the Cheltenham Festival, book festival, they go to Ilkley, and then they'll come to Barnsley. And we have that thing with visitors staying over, that glorious thing where people come and think, I've seen the Tibetan novelist, I'm going to stay over for the knitting. Great, more of that the better.
Yeah, and that's what we're at now with Visit Barnsley. There's this whole thing because Barnsley now, I would say this as I work for the book, but I believe it genuinely. We are on the map now.
Yeah, we are.
And it's grown so much over the last 5-10 years with all the development, not just in the centre, but in the principal towns as well. We've already mentioned, we were talking about a restaurant in Wombwell earlier, weren't we,
Saffron,
as well?
Great restaurant in Wombwell. And it is starting to happen. And I remember when it was, because I've been part of this for a long time, it was seen as a bit daft. What, people are going to come to Barnsley? When Elsecar first opened, people in the council were going, people are going to visit Elsecar. And they're going, what? I remember walking from Wombwell town centre up to Wombwell station, and 2 Chinese people were walking down Uff Lane, and they said, can you direct us to Elsecar? I said, I'm afraid you've got off the wrong train, but I'm going to get that way. He said, we're tourists. We've come to have a look. This is back in the early 90s? Long time ago. And I said, welcome. This is great. You've come to have a look at us. And it happens now, doesn't it? And places like Elsecar can almost, but not quite, be a victim of their own success because they're so busy.
Yeah.
It is. And so I think, we are becoming more visible. And it started, I think, many years ago when Barnsley got in the Premier League. When Barnsley got in the Premier League.
Football does help.
Football helps, you get a lot more away fans. When we were on things like Match of the Day, they'd wheel out some old cliche of a pit wheel turn, but at least we were on the map. And we had these cliches about, Daniel Defoe called us Black Barnsley because we were that mucky, and eventually we're not seen as flat-capped and muffled and whippetted anymore, which is great. And we know that after the pit strike, as a town, as a borough, we could have laid down and died. We could have done, and we didn't. And I'm so proud that we did. We carried on, and we're doing more. And eventually, I think people in the south will pretend they live here. That's my ambition. Yes. They'll go, yes, I have a pied à terre, in Dodworth. You live in Bexley. Yes, but Barnsley's so much dirt no jour. Maybe.
We'll see if we get those, hopefully one day. Talking of the football club,
yes.
You're a big fan of the team, aren't you? And you're a poet in residence there, I believe. What does that mean?
Well,
do you inspire the team?
I don't think I do. What happened is, in 1997, when we got promoted, I was talking to my mate who was a head teacher in Hoyland, and we were both big Barnsley fans. And he said, and I've been doing poetry workshops in his school. I said, why don't we ask them if they fancy having a poet in residence? Because at the time, it was kind of in the air. It was not long after Euro 96, and poetry and football were kind of, art and football, if you like, were kind of connected.
The Three Lions song, was that?
Yeah, that kind of thing. So it was sort of, you could see it, and it was like the end of hooliganism and all that. So it was seen as a thing. So we rang Barnsley FC up and said, look, do you fancy having a poet in residence? And being Barnsley FC, they went, will it cost us all? And we went, and normally you'd charge him, but I thought, no, we'll do it for naught. So then it taught me something about the media, because PA, the Press Association, put out a little thing saying, Barnsley's first Premiership signing, and a picture of me like, Barnsley staff doing this. And it went mad. This is really internet days. I was on everything. I was on local radio, national radio, telly, and I had to write a poem every week for the Barnsley Chronicle.
Right.
And the Chronicle rang up and said, look, you're going to write this poem. It's got to be 16 lines long and fit in that space. And they were right. If I wrote 17 lines, they just didn't print the last line. And people would go, that poem's ended a bit abrupt. Is it that modern poetry? But it just, and what it meant was, if we were playing away anywhere, I'd write a poem for their local radio station. And it was like being a life peer, because actually I never got paid for it, and it gradually sort of faded away. But every now and then, what happens when I'm at the match, we score, somebody behind us will go, put that in a poem. I remember years ago, we scored this spectacular goal, and this bloke went, he'll not write a poem about this, he'll write a sonnet. And then there were a number of poets in residence in football clubs. It was just about that. And so I've been part of our long decline and rebirth, and it's great to see us doing well, but also local football's doing very well. I've been watching Wombwell Town. They're a good signing. You get places like Woodsborough and Athersley Rec and Penistone, all doing well, and local football is such a great thing.
Nice setups at those places.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, I think we should bring that back. You writing poems about who Barnsley are playing this week.
Well, we should. The one that kind of hung on for years, there's a nice local radio show in Norwich where I would go and do stuff for them. I wrote a poem about our goalkeeper, Lars Lees. We had a guy called Lars Lees, German Lars Lees, in the Premiership. I wrote this poem that went, Lars Lees, tall as the trees that grow in Wombwell Wood. Lars Lees, listen please, we think you are very good. And I heard some people chanting it, but then I met Lars Lees, and he went, I'm not called Lars Lees, I'm called Lars Laser.
No. Ruin the whole thing. Nothing rhymes anymore.
Nothing rhymes. Oh dear.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask about, because you do a lot of work with the Yorkshire dialect.
Yes.
And I wondered if you had a particularly one of your favourite phrases in Yorkshire.
I think there's two particular Barnsley words that are phrases. I mentioned earlier the word brusson. I think brusson is so great. It's almost untranslatable. It's like, it's kind of a bit oppositional, a bit kind of, you don't agree with people. He's right, brusson. I just love that word. And also, frame this in. Frame this in. Why don't I frame this in? Meaning, get it right. I'm sure that's an old pit term. Frame this in. Get it right. It's a pit term. Frame this in. And the other word, I think, well, there's two or three that don't travel far outside Barnsley. People will often miswrite the word rate, as in right, R-E-Y-T, as reet. They'll say reet. And I say, if reet is West Yorkshire, rate is South Yorkshire. And also that word your, Y-O-R-E, what you're doing. Meaning, what are you lot doing? Not you, it's like you're. What you're doing? What you're doing there, you're. What you're doing there. And words like that are kind of, and that people think that kind of thing's dying out, but it's not.
Well, I was going to ask that, because you hear that in other places. Maybe not so much Yorkshire, but maybe down in London, and where they're saying there's not as many Cockneys around now. No. Is it? It's not dying out, in your opinion? You think?
I don't think so. I'm just a big fan of language change, and language changes and adapts. So in London, you've got the most wonderful melting pot of languages and dialects and all that. That works wonderfully. And in Barnsley, you get new languages, new dialects, but the old ones are definitely not dying out. You still get your, you still get thee and thou. Thee and thou is still prominent. Maungy, which is like Mardy, but specifically Barnsley. Not in Maungy. My wife calls people a mange pot. Not in your mange pot. That's not changing. And also, what I love is what linguists call the isogloss, where an isogloss is where language changes in a small geographical space. So the big example around here is if you go from Birdwell down the A61 towards Sheffield, they stop saying thee and they start saying dee. They go to Deedar land, down in Addin, and it changes. And the big one in Barnsley is Royston. Royston, in terms of a dialect, is very different, particularly amongst the older people, because they came from Staffordshire Pits to Royston.
Right.
A linguist called Kate Burland did a big study on it, and the accent is different there. And so in any place you can find different accents. Doncaster, different. Rotherham, different. Sheffield, very different. And they're all there, and they're badges of place. They're maps of who you are, is an accent. And, my mate's mother-in-law goes, Ian McMillan, he don't talk like that at house. He puts it on.
He's all posh.
Well, at home, he talks like Prince Charles. King Charles. I said, no, the opposite is the case. When he's at home, King Charles talks like me. People think you put it on. I find that really strange.
Yeah.
Very strange.
I'm always gutted I don't really have an accent. I mean, I probably do when I go down south or somewhere.
Right. Well, yeah, that's true.
But in Barnsley, I'm definitely not.
Do you have a Doncaster accent?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's... Every now and then I'll say things that are quite Yorkshire-ish, but I don't think I'm very
Doncaster has a fantastic accent because it kind of edges over towards Hull a bit. You know, Hull is such a great accent, isn't it? I've got a Stern in my shoe. I've got all the Stern Razors albums. That is so great. So, yeah, Yorkshire and Barnsley in particular are real hotbeds of accents. Although I do remember the first time I was on Radio Sheffield, a man pulled me up on the street and went, "They can't talk like that on radio." And I said, "Well, I'm talking like thee." He says, "Yes, but they can't do it on radio." As though somehow, you know, he said, "I should speak Queen's English on radio." Interesting. And people that say, "Oh, I can hear that. I put the radio voice on Radio 4. Oh, can't help it. I do sound
You shouldn't get that now, though.
I sound just like my brother, actually. He lives in Darfield and he sounds just like me, and people think he's me. He was in a shop in Richmond in North Yorkshire to buy something, and he went, "Can I have that magazine?" And they went, "We heard you on radio. It was great." And so he said, He said to me, "What shall I say?" I said, "Well, just accept the compliment."
Yeah.
Then it happened again. Somebody asked him a difficult supplementary question. They went, "I heard you on radio." He said, "Oh, thank you." They said, "We enjoyed it." He said, "Oh, thanks very much." "What was the name of that person you were interviewing?" And he had to go, "Oh, I think I forgot."
You can just pretend to be you, couldn't you?
It could be me. It could be like a standing.
Yeah.
Body double.
So, Ian, what have you got coming up then now? You're a very busy man, as we've already talked about, but what's coming up over the next year or few months for you?
I'm going to be trying to write some more poems, because I think when you're writing commission stuff, which is always great and I enjoy doing it, the poems get a bit pushed out because there's only so much of your brain you can use. So I wanted to do that. I've been translating. Last year I translated The Barber of Seville into Yorkshire dialect, and I've been translating a bit of The Marriage of Figaro into Yorkshire dialect, and that's an interesting task. So I'm going
You did an opera in a...
That was it, opera. That was it. That was the one. Yeah, it was
the first ever one, wasn't it?
First ever one in Yorkshire. We did it in Bradford. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Because my thing is that I like opera, but could you get the long operatic note to sing the flat Yorkshire vowel like we have? And it's hard because they end up doing it like they're taking the mickey out of it. Because you can imagine and you go, right? And it's like that, trying to meet them. So, yeah, I did a bit of that. But my other ambition is I like to walk a lot. Walking helps me think. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to walk more. I try to do a lot of steps. And every time I'm coming into Barnsley on the bus or going out of Barnsley on the train, I'll see these footpath signs. And there are footpath signs I haven't walked yet. And I've lived here all my life. And I think I'm going to walk more footpaths. That's my ambition. For next year, So if you see me walking past, give me a cheerful thumbs up.
Yeah, and make sure you're reading one of your books as well.
That's it. Hey, are you reading one of my books? I'm Ian McMillan, you know. You never are. You are.
No, fantastic. And one thing I wanted to say.
Yes.
Do you have a poem about tea for our Brewed In Barnsley podcast?
I should.
If not,
I'll write
one.
I will. I should do. I don't think I have.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll give you a bit of time. You'll come up with something about how you don't have milk in your tea. That could be
Yes. So I could write you one and...
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
He's thinking on the spot now. We'll give you some time, Ian.
Here we go. Let's try This is a poem about how I don't have milk in my tea.
Okay.
Because I don't have milk in my tea because milk is not for me. It spoils the taste of your tea, you see. That's why I don't have milk in my tea. I don't have sugar in my tea because it rots me teeth. On top and underneath, the sugar rots me teeth. So I don't have milk in my tea and I don't have sugar in my tea. I only just have water in my tea, just to keep the tea bag hot, because without the water, a cup of tea it's not. It's just a tea bag in a cup, and that's something you can't sup.
I love it. Thank you, Ian. I knew you'd come up with something glorious. Oh, I love that. On that note, I just want to say thank you for joining us today at Brewed In Barnsley. And good luck with everything. And I'm hoping someone is sat next to the COVID memorial one day and they see you and they have a little chat about your your quote.
I'm going to go now and sit.
Yeah, go and sit there now.
I'm good.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.